On the third wedding anniversary, my husband's first love came back. She was a doctor and firmly claimed that I had used hypnosis to transfer my husband's feelings. Because of this, Edward loathed me and sent me to prison. Inside, I endured all kinds of torments and no longer dared to long for the so-called love. When I saw Edward again, he was holding Isabella's hand. Aria, if it weren't for you hypnotizing me all these years, I would have been with Isabella long ago. You're so disgusting. Hearing this, I gave a miserable smile. Since it's still like this, then let's get divorced. I'll help you too. Just Edward, I hope you won't regret it when you know the truth. Today is the New Year's Eve, and it's also the third year that I've been locked up here. Those who were locked up with me gathered in the hall to watch the Spring Festival Gala. I was the only one washing everyone's dirty clothes and socks in the bathhouse. My back hurt terribly. Those were all the scars left by the beatings from those people in the past 3 years. The pair of delicate hands that were originally used for playing the piano were now black and rough. Because it was winter and I had been soaking them in cold water for a long time, they were covered with red and swollen pustules. Even the index finger and middle finger of my right hand were bent in a strange way. On the first day when I came here, I was pinned to the ground by the people here and taught a lesson. 2 of my fingers were forcibly broken by them. Even though 3 years had passed, I still remembered that bone-piercing pain. While I was reminiscing, the wash basin in front of me was suddenly kicked over by someone. The dirty clothes mixed with cold water splashed onto my face all at once, so cold that it chilled me to the bone. I couldn't help shivering. Immediately after that, I was kicked again. I was caught off guard and threw myself forward and fell to the ground. The person who came spat at me and said, "Bitch. Instead of working hard, you're actually thinking of being lazy? Don't you want to eat dinner tonight?" 3 years of beatings and oppression had made me instinctively afraid. I even subconsciously wanted to beg for mercy. I knelt on the cold ground and kept kowtowing. "Victoria, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'll wash the clothes clean right away." Here, if I didn't obey, what I faced was not just beatings. There was also going hungry. The worst time, I was locked in a dark room and starved for 5 whole days. When I was let out, they locked me up with a dog. The instinct to survive forced me to compete with the dog for food. Since then, I had learned my lesson. As long as I could fill my stomach, I could eat whatever they gave me. As long as I could stay alive, I could give up dignity and everything else. Just like at this moment. It was just kneeling down and begging for mercy. I didn't know how many times I had done this in the past 3 years. Perhaps seeing that I was sensible, or perhaps because it was New Year's Eve and they were in a good mood, Victoria and her group didn't make things difficult for me anymore. They just asked me to wash the clothes quickly and mop the floor. I kept nodding and bowing and repeatedly promised that I would finish these tasks as soon as possible. Only then was Victoria satisfied. By the time I finally finished all the work, Victoria and her group were already having a fairly sumptuous New Year's Eve dinner. As for me, I could only squat in the corner and gnaw on the moldy steamed buns. Until the person in charge came to me and said, "Aria, clean yourself up tonight. Someone will come to pick you up tomorrow morning and you can leave." I can leave? Did Edward finally think of me? It's ridiculous to say that Edward was my husband. On the third wedding anniversary, his sweetheart came back. Isabella was a doctor. With just a simple appraisal report, she concluded that I had used hypnosis to transfer Edward's feelings. That's why Edward fell in love with me. The key point was that Edward actually believed it. He thought that all his love for me over the years was fake. If I hadn't hypnotized him, he wouldn't have married me at all. Isabella said to him at that time, "Edward, if it weren't for Aria hypnotizing you, we wouldn't have broken up. The person you should have married is me. It's her who ruined our relationship and made us miss each other for so many years." Because of her words, Edward hated me bitterly. He had me locked up in the police station on the charge of fraud. In these 3 years, he never came to see me once. It's not that I didn't explain it to him. But he didn't believe me. The next morning, I deliberately tidied myself up, except for the scars on my hands that couldn't be covered up. Other parts were covered by clothes. Someone took me out. Seeing the bright and sunny sky outside, I suddenly realized that I had been locked up in this dark place for such a long time. Breathing the long-lost fresh air and looking at the familiar cars not far away, the contemptuous and disdainful look in Isabella's eyes 3 years ago immediately came to my mind. And Edward's sarcastic and disgusted tone, every word and every scene were deeply engraved in my mind. I walked towards the car step by step. As soon as I got close, I saw Edward roll down the car window. He frowned. "What are you dawdling for? Hurry up and get in the car." His tone was full of impatience. I didn't dare to delay for a moment. I opened the door and climbed into the back seat. I stayed there quietly and didn't dare to say a word. Edward looked back at me and sneered. "It seems that it was right to let you stay in there for 3 years. You've become much more obedient." Hearing this, I gave a self-deprecating smile. How could I not be obedient? For a whole 3 years, more than 1,000 days, I was in dire straits every day. Whether I was obedient or not, those people always had reasons to torture me. They even revealed that it was all Isabella's idea. She specifically told them to take good care of me. The daily torments had already smoothed out all my pride and edges. I was no longer the once glorious and proud genius pianist. I was just a pitiful creature struggling to survive. Seeing that I didn't speak, Edward, while driving, said with a look of disgust all over his face, "Look at your slovenly appearance and you still smell. I'll take you to a hotel first. Change your clothes and take a good bath." Those straightforward and disgusted words made me extremely embarrassed. During the 3 years in there, I had never worn a decent piece of clothing. As for the number of times I took a bath, it was even fewer. Even if I did, they were all cold baths. I wanted to tell Edward all this, but I opened my mouth and in the end said nothing. Anyway, no matter what I say, he won't believe me. So why should I ask for humiliation? I sat stiffly in the corner, huddled up like a frightened rabbit, feeling extremely uneasy all the time. Finally, we arrived at the hotel. When I saw the brand new and clean clothes and the steaming hot bath, my eyes still turned red. I didn't cry when I was misunderstood by Edward and even locked up in that place. During the 3 years of being tortured, I didn't shed a single tear either. But at this moment, soaking in the warm hot water, I actually burst into tears. Only until this moment did I believe that I had really left that hellish place. As for why Edward didn't take me home but brought me to the hotel instead, I think it must have something to do with Isabella. During the 3 years when I was away, they must have been together. However, that has nothing to do with me anymore. As for the welcome banquet, I didn't plan to go either. Edward and Isabella couldn't be that kind-hearted. The so-called welcome banquet, I guess, was just to humiliate me. I didn't need to ask for humiliation. After taking a bath and coming out, I tidied myself up briefly and then climbed onto the bed. During the 3 years when I was locked up, I had never had a good night's sleep. At this moment, I just wanted to have a good sleep. But it seemed that Edward didn't want to let me off. Seeing that I hadn't gone out all the time, he directly swiped the room card and came in. When he saw that I was sleeping, he even dragged me up by my arm forcefully. He seemed very angry and shouted loudly, "Arya, I thought you should have learned your lesson after staying in there for 3 years. Unexpectedly, you haven't improved at all. I kindly brought you to the hotel to clean yourself up, but you're actually sleeping soundly here? Do you know that Isabella is still waiting for you at the Houting Hotel to hold a welcome banquet for you?" Suddenly woken up by him, my mind was in a daze. It wasn't until I heard his last sentence that I became fully awake. I couldn't help but sneer at him. Isabella would be glad to see me dead. Would she be kind enough to hold a welcome banquet for me? Edward dragged me out forcefully and snorted coldly, "Isabella kindly proposed to hold a welcome banquet for you. It's okay if you don't appreciate it, but you even slandered her. It seems that you haven't been locked up for long enough. I should have let you stay in there for a few more years." His words made my breath hitch. I subconsciously knelt down to apologize. "I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have said bad things about Isabella. Please, don't lock me up again." Edward seemed to be startled by my extreme reaction. He was stunned for quite a while before he dragged me up, looking puzzled. "Arya, what's wrong with you? Why is your reaction so intense? When he was speaking, he noticed my hands full of scars. Your hands. I withdrew my hands and said tremblingly, I'm sorry. Edward frowned. He was originally about to say something, but his phone rang at an inappropriate time. When he took out his phone, I saw Isabella's name on it. I guessed that the other side had been waiting for a long time and was calling to urge him. Sure enough, after Edward hung up the phone, he said to me, hurry up and follow me to the Houghton Hotel. Isabella is still waiting. After saying that, he walked out first. He didn't think of caring about my hands at all. I smiled self-deprecatingly and followed him out. Since I couldn't avoid it, then I might as well go and see what that woman was up to, all the way to the designated private room. As soon as Edward pushed the door open, Isabella walked towards him cheerfully and affectionately took his arm. Edward. Someone in the private room chimed in, Edward, you're finally here. Sister-in-law and we have been waiting for a long time. Exactly. If you hadn't come, sister-in-law would have gone out to look for you. Edward smiled and said, here I am, aren't I? He pulled Isabella to sit down, with a gentle look on his face. I told you not to hold a welcome banquet for Arya, but you didn't listen. What if you tired yourself out? Watching Edward attentively pour tea and water for Isabella, I felt a bit dazed. I vaguely remembered that before Isabella came back, Edward had also treated me so attentively. He would ask me about my well-being and care about everything related to me. But after Isabella came back, everything had changed. Every time Edward faced me, he was cold and mean, speaking harshly and looking as if he loathed me to the extreme. Isabella leaned against Edward's arms. Seeing that I was still standing there, she pretended to be considerate and said, Sister Arya, sit down quickly. Everyone has been waiting for you for a long time. Knowing that you got out today, we specially prepared this to welcome you. Hearing her words, I looked around and found that all the people in the private room were Edward's friends. In the past, when Edward took me out, these friends of his always called me sister-in-law. I had only been away for 3 years, and now they were already calling Isabella sister-in-law. I looked at Isabella. I didn't miss the arrogance and smugness in her eyes. I knew what she meant. She was just showing off to me. If it had been me 3 years ago, I would definitely have asked Edward to give me an explanation. Or directly put Isabella in her place. But now, I didn't love Edward anymore. The inhumane torture in prison had already worn away my love for him bit by bit. If she wanted to make me lose control and laugh at me, I could only say that Isabella had miscalculated. I calmly sat down, ignored everyone present, and directly called the waiter to ask them to serve the dishes. Before I came, Isabella and the others had already ordered the dishes, so the dishes were all ready. As soon as I finished speaking, the waiter brought the dishes one by one. These steaming hot, delicious-looking dishes immediately whetted my appetite. I couldn't wait to pick up the chopsticks and started eating heartily. This move made Edward and his brothers all stunned. However, Isabella chuckled softly, Sister Arya, how long has it been since you last ate? Why are you gobbling it up like this? Didn't you have a good life in prison? Her words made me freeze all over. Instantly, the images of being abused and beaten came to my mind. Trying hard to control myself from trembling, I raised my head and looked at Isabella with hatred. I gritted my teeth and said word by word, don't you know how I lived in there? Isabella pretended to be scared and shrank into Edward's arms, looking aggrieved. Edward, I was just concerned about Sister Arya, but she doesn't seem to appreciate it. Edward became furious all of a sudden. He glared at me and said, Arya, how can you talk like that? Isabella was kind enough to care about you and even specially thought of holding a welcome banquet for you. How can you be so ungrateful? Has your upbringing been eaten by dogs? In those pitch-black eyes of his, there was nothing but disgust for me. Even though I had already made up my mind not to love Edward anymore, I still couldn't help but feel a pang in my heart. It hurt so much. I forced a smile and stared at Edward, then said slowly, yes, I have no upbringing. I snatched someone else's love. I'm guilty. It's all my fault. I paused for a moment and then said the words that I had wanted to say the most in the past 3 years, so, Edward, let's get divorced. After leaving these words behind, I didn't care what Edward's reaction was and just left directly. I went back to the hotel where I had just stayed. I was feeling dizzy. I opened the door of the room, simply washed my face, and then lay down to rest. I was sleeping soundly when suddenly I was woken up by the sound of the door opening. I exclaimed, "Who is it?" The room was not lit, and I could only see a dark figure at the door. I immediately turned on the bedside lamp. Only then did I find that the person who came was Edward. He reeked of alcohol and staggered towards me. I looked at him warily and said, "Edward, what are you doing here?" Seeing him getting closer and closer, I instinctively felt scared and couldn't help shouting at him, "Don't come over." Seeing that I was full of resistance on my face, Edward instantly became angry. "Arya, what's your attitude? If it weren't for me speaking up for you, you would still be in prison. You still want to divorce me? I tell you, even if there's a divorce, it should be me who brings it up. What are you? You're so ungrateful." The angrier he got, the redder his eyes became. He stared at me fixedly. I tried hard to calm myself down. I didn't quite understand why Edward was so angry. I wanted a divorce to help him and Isabella be together, but he wasn't happy about it. Thinking like this, I took a deep breath and then said to him, "If you divorce me, you can be with Isabella rightfully. Don't you want to make her an unseemly mistress?" "Shut up!" Edward suddenly shouted at me, "How dare you mention Isabella? If it weren't for you hypnotizing me back then, I would have already married Isabella. How could I have let you occupy the position of my wife?" I felt so sad. I hadn't hypnotized Edward at all. It was all just Isabella's one-sided story. Why didn't Edward believe me? I sighed helplessly. "Edward, I'll say it again. I didn't hypnotize you. It was Isabella who abandoned you back then." "You're lying." Edward interrupted me. "Don't even think about deceiving me. Clearly, it was all done by you. You broke us up. You liked me, were jealous of Isabella being with me, so you deliberately sent her abroad and then hypnotized me to make me marry you." Edward became more and more excited as he spoke. He rushed over and grabbed my neck. "A bitch like you, spending 3 years in prison is too light for you. You should just die." As he spoke, the strength in his hands gradually increased. The difference in strength between men and women was huge, and besides, Edward had lost his reason now. I couldn't break free at all. The instinctive desire to survive made me struggle desperately, but it involved the old wounds on my body that had been beaten before. The feeling of suffocation and pain intertwined. I just felt a blackness before my eyes and then lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was lying on a hospital bed. "Doctor, the patient is awake." Seeing that I opened my eyes, someone quickly called the doctor over. I turned my head to look and found that it was Sebastian, Edward's assistant. "Why are you here?" I looked around and found that Edward was nowhere to be seen. Sebastian replied respectfully, "It was Edward who sent you to the hospital. He has something to do and left now. He asked me to stay and take care of you." After saying that, he hesitated to say something. "You have a lot of injuries on your body. Do you want to tell Edward?" I shook my head and forced a self-deprecating smile. "There's no need. Even if I tell him, he won't care. Maybe he'll think that I'm deliberately doing it just to win his sympathy." Now Edward's heart was all on Isabella. He believed whatever Isabella said. I had already made a mistake once. Why should I ask for humiliation again? Sebastian sighed and finally didn't say anything more. The doctor came over to examine me and said that my body was seriously damaged and needed a good rest. Otherwise, it would easily endanger my life. Sebastian was afraid that I would be in a bad mood and comforted me, "Madam, don't think too much. As long as you take good care of yourself, your body will definitely get better." I smiled but didn't say anything. Even if my body got better, my heart was already riddled with holes and could never be healed again. Seeing that I was in low spirits, Sebastian told me to have a good rest and he would go outside to buy me something to eat. The ward was really stuffy. After Sebastian left, I wanted to go outside to get some fresh air. As I was walking, I saw Edward. He was carefully helping Isabella out of a consulting room. Their hands that were clasped together were placed on Isabella's stomach. I glanced at the door plate. I found that they had come to the obstetrics and gynecology department. I collected myself. So Isabella was pregnant. Come to think of it, during the 3 years when I was away, the two of them had already been together. It would be abnormal if there was no child. I forced a smile and subconsciously raised my hand to touch my lower abdomen. There had originally been an unformed baby there too. Unfortunately, it was gone in the 2nd month after I was locked up in prison. Thinking of this, I felt a pain in my heart. A dense feeling of suffocation came over me. I wanted to turn around and leave, but Edward saw me. He immediately frowned with a frosty look on his face. "Arya, why are you here? Are you following me?" Was this guy out of his mind? Wasn't it him who asked Sebastian to send me to the hospital? I didn't answer his question. I just glanced at Isabella's stomach and said softly, "Congratulations. You're going to be a father." After pausing for a moment, I added, "By the way, since there's a child, why don't we find a time to get divorced? I'll make room for your child and mother." I thought that by saying this, Edward would be happy. After all, Isabella beside him was already smiling smugly. It seemed that the position of Mrs. Edward already belonged to her. But Edward seemed very angry. His face became even uglier. "Arya, you're not qualified to mention divorce to me." He let go of Isabella and quickly walked up to me. He grabbed my chin hard. "Do you think spending 3 years in prison can make up for the crimes you committed? I tell you, before I completely loathe you, you can't even think about getting divorced." He left this sentence behind, completely ignoring my pale face and not even bothering with Isabella. He turned around and left. I looked in the direction he left, and a bitter feeling rose in my heart. 3 years of being locked up, 3 years of being tortured, and even losing my own flesh and blood. Weren't these punishments enough? I clearly didn't do anything. Why didn't he believe me? Edward, Isabella, and I were classmates in university. Isabella was the campus belle and had never lacked suitors. Edward was one of them. He chased after Isabella for a full 4 years, taking care of every detail. But he never got a response. Until just before graduation, when Isabella planned to study abroad, she said to Edward, "When I come back, I'll marry you." Edward believed her. He was actually so silly as to wait for Isabella to come back. I really couldn't bear to see him clinging to an empty promise that would never come true, so I started to pursue him. It took me a whole year of hard work to win him over. At the beginning, he said that he wouldn't marry me because he was waiting for Isabella to come back. I thought that I could gradually make him forget Isabella. In this way, I accompanied him through 8 years. He transformed from having nothing at the beginning to becoming a business tycoon now. As for our marriage, in the 5th year that we were together, I boldly proposed to him in front of all his company's employees. To make him agree, I even invited media reporters. Edward cared about his reputation and the reputation of the company. Facing so many employees and reporters, he had no choice but to agree. But he just got the marriage certificate with me. In the early days of our marriage, because he resented my using underhanded means, he never gave me a good look. It was only after a long time that he gradually accepted it. I thought that he had already forgotten Isabella. But on the 3rd wedding anniversary, the moment Isabella showed up, Edward still resolutely abandoned me and chose Isabella. He even gave up our 8-year relationship just because of Isabella's baseless words. He attributed all of this to the fact that I had hypnotized him, which was why he was with me. Because of this, he loathed me and mercilessly locked me in prison. At that moment, I finally realized that I had never entered Edward's heart. I drafted the divorce agreement in the hospital ward. I was thinking that the next time I saw Edward, I would directly ask him to sign it. However, I didn't see Edward again until I was discharged from the hospital. On the day of my discharge, it was Sebastian who came to the hospital to help me with the discharge procedures. Since I was already prepared to divorce Edward when I left the hospital, I asked Sebastian to give me a ride. After all, if the mountain won't come to me, I'll have to go to the mountain. Just as I was about to get out of the car, Sebastian stopped me. He hesitated to speak. "Madam, Edward's mental state recently seems a bit off." I frowned. "What's going on?" Sebastian gritted his teeth as if he had made up his mind. "Isn't Isabella a psychologist? She said that you had used hypnosis on Edward before. In order to help Edward recover, she took him to the hospital for several treatments. But I always feel that she did something to Edward." Hearing his words, I fell into deep thought. A bold guess flashed through my mind. After thinking for a while, I said to Sebastian, "Go to the hospital where Isabella works and find out what medicine she used or what methods she adopted when treating Edward." After saying that, thinking of something, I added, "By the way, go and investigate Isabella's situation during the years she was abroad." Standing at the door of my home, I felt dazed for a moment. It had only been 3 years since I left, but I had the illusion that a lifetime had passed. After taking several deep breaths, I tried to enter the password to open the door. But after pressing the password that I had memorized by heart, it showed that the password was incorrect. I was stunned for a moment. Then I smiled self-deprecatingly. I was really being silly. I guessed that during the 3 years when I was away, Isabella had already taken over my place. Since this house had a new mistress, how could it still use the previous password? I calmed myself down and was about to call Edward when suddenly the door was opened at this time. It was Edward who opened the door. He was holding a spatula in his hand and even had an apron tied around his waist. He was so different from the man in my impression. After all, during the 8 years we were together, he had never entered the kitchen. Sure enough, it wasn't that he didn't want to, but that I wasn't worthy. I wasn't the person for whom he was willing to cook. Edward didn't seem to expect that I would come. When he saw me, he quickly took a few steps back. There was undisguised disgust on his face, as if he was afraid of getting the bad luck from me. He frowned. "What are you doing here? Isabella hasn't been feeling well recently. Leave quickly. She doesn't want to see you." I didn't pay attention to what Edward was saying. Instead, I stared blankly at the furnishings and decorations in the room. Compared to 3 years ago, the place had changed a lot. All traces of me were gone. In their place were all things related to Isabella. Isabella coughed a few times and slowly walked out of the room. "Oh, it's Sister Aria." When I looked at her, I keenly noticed the piano in her room. That was a gift from my mother on my birthday. It was also the last thing she left me. Edward clearly knew how precious it was to me, but he still gave it to Isabella? I pushed the man in front of me away and shouted loudly, "Edward, why did you give my piano to Isabella?" "That's my thing." Isabella walked over and took Edward's arm. "Sister Aria, don't be angry. I really like that piano. I happen to be free these days, so I asked Edward to move the piano into the bedroom. Blame me if you want." She said words of taking the blame, but there was a smug expression on her face. Edward put his arm around Isabella's waist and said with concern, "You're pregnant. Why didn't you stay in bed and rest? What are you doing out here?" Then, he took out a bank card from his wallet and threw it at me. "Take the money in the card. It's enough to buy your broken piano. Take the money and get out of here. I don't want to see you." My eyes turned red because of his insulting words. I clenched my fists, suppressing the anger in my heart, and said word by word, "Edward, I don't want your stinking money. I just want my piano. Give my piano back to me." Edward didn't even bother to look at me. He protected Isabella and walked towards the bedroom. "Don't pay attention to her. She's just a crazy woman." I couldn't hold it in anymore. I rushed forward and grabbed Edward's clothes. "Edward, don't go too far. I'll say it again. Give my piano back to me." Isabella saw that I was pestering Edward and wanted to separate us. "Sister Aria, let's talk calmly. Let go of Edward quickly." I was annoyed by her and pushed her hard. "Get out of here. Stop being so hypocritical." I hated Isabella to the core. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have broken up with Edward, nor would I have been locked in that hellish place. I wouldn't have lost my child either. She had taken away my lover, everything that belonged to me, and now she even wanted to take away the only thing my mother left me. Why didn't a wicked person like her just die? Isabella was pushed by me and almost fell down. Fortunately, Edward caught her. She hid in Edward's arms in fear, sobbing softly, "Edward, I was so scared just now. If I had fallen down from that push, our baby would surely be gone." It would have been okay if she hadn't said that, but once she did, Edward became furious at once. He slapped me hard and shouted angrily, "Arya, have you had enough of making a scene?" His strength was so great that I fell straight to the ground. Covering my slapped and reddened face, I looked at him stubbornly. "I want my piano." Edward was so angry that he ground his teeth, but finally he laughed. "You want the piano?" He snorted coldly, then took an axe from the warehouse. Before I could react, he chopped the piano with the axe directly. He even said righteously, "I'll destroy this broken thing and see if you still want it." "No." I rushed over to stop him, but he pushed me to the ground. My forehead hit the corner of the table and I felt dizzy and blacked out for a while. When I stood up again, the originally intact piano had already been smashed by Edward. "Ah!" I crawled over like crazy, stroking the dents on the piano, and tears streamed down my face. It was gone. The only thing my mother left me was gone just like that. I raised my head, looking at Edward with hatred, and said full of resentment, "Edward, I hate you. I hate you." Perhaps because I was too emotional, I spat out a mouthful of blood directly. It splashed straight onto Edward's clothes. At the same time, something warm seemed to drip down from my forehead, gradually blurring my vision. I just felt dizzy and couldn't bear it anymore and completely passed out. Before closing my eyes, I seemed to see Edward rushing towards me with a panicked look on his face. When I regained consciousness again, I seemed to be in the hospital. Because I smelled the smell of disinfectant. But I couldn't open my eyes. There was someone chattering in my ear. Judging from the voice, it seemed to be the doctor. I heard the doctor say, "The patient has been abused many times before and has a lot of old wounds on her body. Moreover, some of the wounds have affected her spleen and lungs. She needs to take good care of herself and shouldn't be too emotionally agitated. If this happens a few more times, even the king of hell won't be able to save her." Then I heard Edward's voice, "What's going on? How could she have wounds on her body?" Hearing this, I just felt like laughing. Didn't he know best where my wounds came from? Immediately after that, Sebastian's voice rang in my ear. "Madame's wounds were caused by being beaten in prison. Last time when I sent Madame to the hospital, I sensed something was wrong, so I took the liberty to investigate. Only then did I know that Madame had been constantly abused in there, and..." Seeing that Edward's face was very gloomy, Sebastian hesitated for a moment before continuing, "And I found out that when you sent Madame in there, she was already pregnant. Due to the beating she suffered, she had a miscarriage." Edward staggered and his face turned as pale as a sheet. How could this be? He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but couldn't say a word. Sebastian sighed and took out something to show Edward. "These are what I found in the hospital where Isabella works. You were never hypnotized by Madame. It was all just Isabella's one-sided story. Moreover, in the past 3 years, she has been hypnotizing you subconsciously all the time, which made you firmly believe that it was Madame who hypnotized you and made you loathe Madame so much." "You're lying." Edward didn't believe his words. "It's all false. How could Isabella hypnotize me? I had always loved her originally. She didn't need to hypnotize me at all." Sebastian seemed unable to bear it anymore. He took out his mobile phone and said to Edward, "Edward, wake up. Isabella is a bad woman. The baby in her belly isn't yours at all." Listening to Sebastian's explanation, I just learned that after Isabella went abroad, she married a local rich man just for the sake of wealth and luxury. But she fled back to China because she couldn't bear domestic violence. Although she got back together with Edward, that rich man still found her. Isabella didn't dare to divorce the rich man. She could only deal with the rich man while secretly meeting Edward. She just thought that when the baby was born, she could use the baby as a bargaining chip to divorce the rich man and then be with Edward. In Sebastian's mobile phone that he showed to Edward were all the intimate photos of Isabella and that rich man over the years. The room was deadly silent. Edward came to my hospital bed in a daze and murmured, "What have I done?" He held my hand. "Arya, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. It's all my bad. In the past, I was extremely happy whenever Edward touched me. But now, as long as he touched me, I felt disgusted." I pulled my hand away from his and sat up from the bed. "Edward, I heard what Sebastian said. You also know all the truth now, but I don't want to forgive you. Not all things can be easily forgotten just with an apology." Edward reached out and grabbed me, his eyes full of pleading. "Arya, I'm really wrong. Please forgive me, okay?" He was choked with sobs. "I do love you. I was blinded by Isabella and that's why I did things that hurt you." Edward cried. He had never cried in front of me before. In the past, I would surely have felt heartbroken and forgiven him. But now, I didn't feel the slightest bit of emotion in my heart. Repeated disappointments had already made me exhausted. The hellish place had already shattered my love for Edward into pieces. What supported me to survive was only hatred. I shook my head gently. "Edward, it's too late. You never believed me, so the love you mentioned is too cheap." I paused for a moment and then added, "No, you don't deserve to say the word love at all." Edward's eyelashes trembled slightly, and his face was terribly pale. Taking out the divorce agreement that I had already drafted, I said calmly, "Sign the divorce agreement. I don't want to have any more entanglement with you." Edward seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown. He shook his head, took the divorce agreement, and tore it up in a few strokes. He kept murmuring, "I won't get divorced. I won't divorce you." He was about to say something else when Isabella suddenly appeared. She still didn't know what had happened in the ward. She came up and took Edward's arm, acting coquettishly, and said, "Edward, you sent Sister Arya to the hospital, and I don't mind, but haven't you stayed here a bit too long? The baby and I are both hungry." Isabella thought Edward would obediently follow her. But the man shook off her hand with a look of disgust and said, "Don't touch me, I feel sick." Isabella's smiling face froze. She looked at me and then at Edward and said, "Edward, what's wrong with you? Did Sister Arya tell you something?" I sneered and said, "Don't wrong me. I didn't do anything. Why don't you tell us what you did during the years abroad?" I don't know what my words reminded Isabella of, but her face turned a bit pale. Before she could say anything, Edward threw a bunch of documents and photos at her and said, "I know everything you did, Isabella. You really disappoint me." Isabella glanced at those things and her face turned even paler. She eagerly grabbed Edward's hand and said, "Edward, these are all fake. It must be Arya who deliberately framed me. Don't be deceived by her." Edward shook her off and said, "Isabella, do you think I'm a fool?" Isabella was both angry and anxious. She was certain that I had investigated her and was extremely angry. She reached out to slap me and said, "It's all because of you, you bitch. You framed me." But the slap didn't land on my face. Instead, Edward slapped her. He protected me behind him and glared at Isabella and said, "Isabella, that's enough. Don't go too far." "I'm going too far?" Isabella laughed out loud and said sarcastically, "Do you think you're a good person? Arya was locked up in prison by you for 3 years. How many times did you visit her? What kind of deep love are you pretending to have here?" Edward's face turned pale at her words and then he became angry out of shame and said, "Shut up. If it weren't for you hypnotizing me and making me dislike Arya, how could I have hurt her? You're the real culprit." Watching the two of them biting each other, I just felt noisy. I rubbed my glabella and said to them, "If you want to argue, please go out and argue. I'm annoyed." Isabella looked at me and suddenly laughed. She said to Edward, "Edward, you think that if you get rid of me, you can get back together with Arya. You're just dreaming. She doesn't love you anymore. Can't you see?" Edward shook his head and said, "Shut up. You're lying to me. Arya loves me. We were together for 8 years. How could she just stop loving me? I already know I was wrong. She will forgive me." Isabella burst out laughing and said, "Edward, You're just deceiving yourself. Ask Arya if she still loves you. Do you dare to ask? Edward looked at me. Our eyes met and there was calmness in my eyes. There was no love for him in them anymore. Edward couldn't accept it. He shook his head frantically and murmured, "No, Arya loves me." I don't know what he thought of, but he glared at Isabella fiercely and said, "It's all because of you. If it weren't for you, Arya and I wouldn't have come to this point. You deserve to die." With that, he suddenly grabbed a fruit knife on the table next to him and stabbed Isabella in the abdomen several times. His actions were too sudden. By the time I reacted, Isabella had been stabbed several times by him. Edward was stabbing the knife in and out furiously while saying insanely, "Die. As long as I kill you, Arya will forgive me and she will love me. You're crazy." After being shocked, I quickly rushed over and pushed him away. Isabella fell into a pool of blood. She covered her stomach and cried out in pain, "The baby, my baby." I quickly called the doctors and nurses. Isabella didn't die. But the baby in her stomach couldn't be saved. Her husband abroad also found out what she had done. I heard that the man took Isabella back abroad regardless of her miscarriage and locked her at home, scolding and beating her all day long. Presumably, her remaining life will be accompanied by abuse and domestic violence. Such an end is quite good. It's all her own fault. As for Edward, he was sentenced to several years for intentional injury. I felt quite sorry. 3 years ago, he sent me to prison. Now it's his turn to taste the bitterness of being abused and beaten in there. I thought this was the end of my story with Edward, but I didn't expect that he would ask to see me. I didn't want to see him. But he threatened to commit suicide and asked the police to come to me. Reluctantly, I went to see him. It had only been a month or two since I last saw him, but he had become a lot more haggard. He was not only sloppy but also had lost a lot of weight. When he saw me, he was excited and said, "Arya, I know you hate me and don't want to forgive me, but I love you. I really love you. I'm willing to spend my whole life to make up for it. Can you wait for me to get out and we start over?" I didn't expect that even in such a situation, Edward still wanted to win me back. Broken love is just broken. No matter how you mend it, it can't be restored. I sighed softly and said, "Edward, why haven't you faced the reality? We can't go back." Ignoring the sadness and pleading in his eyes, I said word by word, "You keep saying that you love me, but in fact, your love is worthless. You never believed me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have denied our 8 years just because of Isabella's words and sent me to the place where you are now. You don't deserve to say love. You just stay here and repent." I didn't pay any more attention to him and turned around and left. Stepping out of the gate here, I found that the weather outside was extremely good. All the haze had passed. And I will start a new life.